But anyway, we want to continue on with trusting God. We want to, Lord willing, finish up chapter 12 here tonight. Some objectives of adversity that we looked at to this point. The aspect of kind of putting the first three together, putting holiness and dependence. Those first three really go well with what we're talking about tonight in regards to our relationship with our God. But to be reminded that the Lord prunes us, and we know that from John, and yet at times when we face adversity, when we face trials, when we face problems in life, I don't know if I can say this. I don't know that I often think, oh, this is the Lord pruning me. So I might bear more fruit. I don't know that that's often the case that runs through our minds automatically. Something goes the way that we didn't think it was going to go, and we can rejoice in the fact that the Lord is doing the work in our hearts. That may not be the norm way of thinking. Reminding ourselves that as He prunes, it's so that we become more like Him. And through that whole process, even going back to John's reminding us then that we have to be abiding in Him, part of the correlation or the pruning aspect and our dependence with Him. But there's also times that the Lord allows things in our life just to remind us or instill within us that aspect of perseverance. James 1 kind of points that out as well, and we count in all joy when we fall into diverse temptations, because there's benefits, and one of those benefits is that patience, that perseverance that takes place. Again, without trials, how long would we persevere? I think that some of the disadvantage, if I can say it this way, of parenting styles today, if I can say it that way, is that seems to be a trend where parents, unlike the days gone by, remember, even beyond my generation, where the stories were that your parents made you walk uphill both ways through the snow barefoot to school, and school's in session, you get out there, go. Today, it seems like parents are in such a hurry to kind of hover and guard their children from any and all adversities. And even within the school, we have the whole bullying and the very vast and wide definition of what it means to bully. And I think we're raising a generation here, or we're seeing raised a generation that has faced very little adversity. And I think, spiritually speaking, that's very dangerous. Physically, morally speaking as well, it is. Not picking on the military by any means, but it's even interesting how even the military is adjusting to a generation that isn't quite the same as they were generations before. I don't remember what I just read here recently, something with the Navy. Well, I guess the Navy, from what I was reading, the Navy used to have something where if you were you weren't part of, like, obviously the Navy transports more than just the crew. Sometimes they're actually the vessel to get from point A to point B for others, and specifically even some Marines that use the Navy, part of the same Department of Defense, to get from point A to point B. And so if you're one of these Uber passengers and you're misbehaving, I guess the Navy used to have where you would be set off to 1 second, you could only have water and bread and water. And now they're adjusting that because that's too harsh. Now that does sound a little rough. Now, I think from the stories I've heard that there's probably some who are, especially Marines, non-Navy, who probably that's all they want, at least for the first few weeks, all around the ship doing this. Bread and water is all I can handle this way. But anyway, we're definitely losing out on perseverance. And when that takes place in our lives, when we are running from problems instead of facing them, when we are seeking out our decisions to avoid and go around situations instead of allowing God to bring us right through that, we miss out on one of the benefits, one of the objectives of adversity. Service, again, we miss out on that because we have so many opportunities to impact others in their walk, in their life, and then as well even just the benefit to us from those that have gone before us as well. Fellowship, we looked at last week, the very reality of together koinonia, not only just coming alongside of somebody in adversity, but coming alongside of somebody while you're both in the trial. And a challenge that we have kind of goes along the lines of accountability and just being honest and genuine. The 3 points I put up there last week, we must stop hiding I didn't correct it, but hiding the fact that we face trials. We must stop thinking that we're better than others, and we must stop living as though we are self-sufficient. Tonight, we want to look at, we want to change the word. We want to look at relationship. We want to look at the relationship that we have with our God. Or, if you write it down, I guess it would be fellowship again, but this time not fellowship with others, but fellowship with our God. There is a quote, and I had to get rid of it here, yes. Through adversity, we learn to bow before His sovereignty, to trust His wisdom, and to experience His consolation of love. That is a great summary, not only of the entire book, because we've already been going over the aspects of His sovereignty, wisdom, and love. But it's a great definition of what it means to know our God. To truly know Him. Not just the head knowledge, but to truly know our God, which number 7 should be saying relationship. To truly have a relationship with our God is understanding that through adversity, through trial, through problems, through life, we learn to bow before His sovereignty, to trust in His wisdom, and to experience His consolation of His love. And in our books, this section is, I think, just a page and a half, if I'm not mistaken, in regards to relationship. But I thought these kind of taking that sentence apart, this quote, and using that as our 3 points, remind us of bowing before His sovereignty. The relationship aspect that we gain in our walk with our Lord in regards to learning how to bow before His sovereignty. Simple question would be, can I trust my God when I'm doubting His sovereignty? Am I trusting my God when I am doubting that He is in control? When I'm doubting that He has power? Use an example. Say tomorrow one of us has a very big surgery. For illustration purposes, hopefully none of us do, but just for illustration purposes. And whoever is driving us to the hospital, family member, somebody is driving us to the hospital tomorrow morning, and obviously because we're having surgery, we can't eat or drink since midnight. But whoever is taking us is either very inconsiderate or we are very gracious, but we allow them to stop at the coffee shop. And while they're in there getting their donut and coffee, and we are watching them, we strike up a conversation with somebody there in the coffee shop. And perhaps they've asked why we are sitting here nervously, kind of rubbing our fingers and pacing around and not eating or drinking anything. And we explain to them the agenda of the day. I have surgery, pretty big surgery, pretty intensive surgery, and a little concerned about it. Trusting in God, but a little concerned. Now, what would change in our attitude if this guy says, well, you know what, I never even finished high school. I don't really even know a thing about medical procedures, but I think this. I don't think this is a very big one. I don't think it's very big. In fact, I bet most people could do this. In our anxiety, we could use that word. Would his comfort help us at all? No. Now, if he was, say, a med student or a nurse or even better, a surgeon, that might have some impact. But some guy that had just admitted he didn't even finish high school and knows nothing about medical aspects or medical procedures, but he's pretty convinced that's not a big deal, I'm not going to change as much. Now, we get to the hospital. The nurse comes in, preparing us, going through all the routines, filling out all the paperwork, all that. And she makes a comment, hey, you're having this surgery, just verifying you're having this surgery. Make sure we're cutting you open in the right spot. And such and such of a doctor, surgeon, is doing it, and the nurse says to you, of all of Central Illinois, you've got the doctor that is the highest rated for that surgery. Would that have an impact on perhaps our anxiety level? Hearing it from a third party to say, you know, hey, what you're having done now, you've got the best doing it.
Remember that happened with Matt.
Yes.
They told us that.
Yes.
It gives me comfort. Like,
Correct.
well, that's who should be doing this.
Exactly. Yes, with the Children's Hospital back many years ago. So that helps a little bit. The surgeon comes in then for his normal whisking his way through, as seems like maybe they're required to do. And they come in and they head out. But in that time frame that he is there, he makes some comments of very simply explains what he's going to do, how he's going to do it, what it's going to be like afterwards, And he explains, hey, I've done 427,000 of these, and I have not had one thing go wrong in any of them. Suddenly, I would hope that our anxiety that we had when we were talking to Dropout Coffee Drinker is suddenly a little different now. Now we've seen the guy, we've talked to him, he's acknowledged, he knows what he's doing. But let's imagine that as the surgeon walks out, the entire building shakes, the lights flicker, and there is God standing in your room. And he leans over and whispers into your ear, "You got this. No problems. I will bring you through this safely." Now, if we could compare the very presence of God in our room compared to Dropout Coffee Drinker, there's quite a difference. Even comparing the highly respected surgeon's words and the very fact that God himself has said, "Hey, you've got this. I won't allow anything to happen to you." I would have to say that, obviously the surgeon's done whatever I said, 427,000 of these with no problems. But yeah, this is the first time I've ever done this. And he's never operated on me before. And if something could go wrong, I'd probably be the one to make it go wrong. So there's still all right, so I could be number one. But you have God standing there. Certainly it makes a difference. Just meaning this, if we could trust our God to that extent, we have that kind of confidence in our God that exceeds the confidence that we have in man, confidence that we have in all of mankind. So we learn how it is then to bow before his sovereignty. But how often when we are facing those trials, because the room doesn't shake and the light don't flicker, then suddenly God isn't standing there in the flesh, leaning over and saying, "You got this. I'm not going to allow anything to happen to you." We don't hear those words. We don't see his presence, unfortunately, physically anyway. And we face life, we face circumstances, we face adversity. And sometimes it's hard for us to bow before his sovereignty, to understand he does have this. He's in control. Now, that doesn't mean nothing bad will ever happen to me. But it means that whatever does happen to me, he's in control of it. That he has the power to dictate all the steps and all the actions, all the reactions, all that takes place to me. Psalm 16, verse 9, the first reference I have up there says this: "A man's heart devises his way." What a great way of saying it. Man thinks he's got it all figured out, but the Lord directs his steps. And so even beyond what we think we have planned, our God is in control. Job 42, verse 2 says it this way. Job's words, he says, "I know that thou canst do everything." Speaking of God, I know that you can do everything, and that no thought can be withholden from thee. Can you imagine that not even a thought of God's can be stopped? How many times have we had a thought? Well, let's be honest, you don't have to raise your hand or admit anything publicly, but how many times have we walked to the room and thought, "Why did I come in here?
Mm-hmm.
What was I going to do? What was I needing to get?" I imagine that's probably happened to all of us at times.
Yes.
Why? I think Josiah, even, he's 7, I think there's times he'll open up the refrigerator and he just stands there and says, "Josiah, what are you getting?" "I don't know." Close the refrigerator. This verse says, Job is acknowledging, I know that you can do everything. In fact, not even a thought of yours disappears with you standing there saying, "Now, what was it I was going to do?" Even his thoughts can't be stopped. Even his thoughts and not just his actions, but even that which he thinks cannot be withholden, cannot be stopped from him. In the New Testament, Matthew chapter 19, verse 26, extending all the way to the aspect of salvation, but I think it applies to all aspects of our life. It says, "But Jesus beheld them and said unto them, With men this is impossible." Kind of going back a few verses there in Matthew 19, it's where he mentions about it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of heaven. Disciples scratch their head and say, "Well, who then can be saved? How can this thing be so? How can this be accomplished for us? Certainly we're not rich, but if that's a comparison of a camel going through the eye of a needle, then who could be saved?" And Christ's response is this: "With men this is impossible, But with God, all things are possible. With God, all things are possible. And if even our salvation, that which is seemingly the impossible of the impossible, is possible with our God, then think of all the things that are going on in our lives. And I know our entire books have been dealing with His sovereignty, His wisdom, and His love. But a quick reminder of the connection then of adversity. Can I grasp the sovereignty of God? Can I grasp the power of God outside of trials? It's in a simple way. How often has it been said something about the power of God? Just talk about in nature. Oftentimes you stand there and you say something about the power of God. Think of the instances where we say that and realize that it was many times because of some adversity, whether it be a very strong storm, the might of a waterfall, or the power of God, the crashing of the waves of the ocean. Several instances where we just say there's the power of God at display. Even in the aspect of the rainbow after the storm, or the mighty winds, whatever it might be. So many times when we acknowledge the power of God, it's during an instance where there has been adversity, where there has been something that it's not often that you look at a butterfly and say, oh, the power of God. Though we certainly could, we certainly should. But that's not normally the case where we would say that. I'm thinking of the books from Basic Youth Conflict that probably acknowledge the power of God in every animal and being. But how often do we actually, when we say acknowledging the sovereignty of the power of our God, many times, even in the acknowledgement of it, it's through the might of calamity, of tragedy, of power, of destruction, of whatever it might be. Again, I think I mentioned a couple months ago now that even in insurance business and in claim process, you have the acts of God, and how it's kind of unfortunate that the only things that we declare acts of God are that which is destruction. Whereas all things are acts of God. But again, can we acknowledge His sovereignty with the absence of trial? Can I acknowledge the power of God while kind of averting tragedy in my life? Something comes my way, and I'm going to do everything to avoid it. Will I truly grasp and understand in great detail His sovereignty, His power, His might, His control? If I am always remaining trying to be in control, if I am the one trying to dictate, if I am the one that is doing the, bypassing, I'm missing out on seeing God's hand. I'm missing out on God's power. And I need to learn how to bow before Him and His sovereignty, which obviously improves my relationship with Him. That improves because of trials, of adversity, of problems. But the second phrase in this quote, you have to adversity learn to bow before His sovereignty, but also then to trust in His wisdom. Trusting in His wisdom. And I know that this is all review again, kind of the review of the whole book, kind of summed up in that one quote. But it may be one thing to admit that God is powerful. But what about all the incidental details of our lives? What about all those situations where we wonder, what is God doing? We know You're in control, but what are You doing? Is this best for me? Take, for example, that Daniel Baker, the Marine. I just use him because he's local. But the 5 Marines that were killed a couple weeks ago. Lost at sea, let's say. The plane went down and have not, as far as I know, have not found them yet. Questions could be asked of, well, God, I know You're in control, but why do You allow that to happen? Why is this good? We know that all things work together for good, but how is this going to be good? And again, I think I said this last week, but I can't imagine being the family and having the death of a child, but you don't have actually a child to bury. That's going to be awfully rough, and the question could easily be asked, what about God's wisdom? And how can I trust in His wisdom? Again, we have to realize that kind of the glue that ties our adversity in with our relationship with our God, or let me say it this way, the glue that ties in my life with my relationship with my God many times is that adversity. It's the trials that I go through that strengthen me. It's trials that I go through that remind me of who He is. And honestly, I think there's a lot of times that for all of us, it's hard to trust in His wisdom. You know you're in control, but is this best? Is this best for me? Is this best for my family? Is this best for my kids? Are you correct in your thinking here, God? I imagine, hopefully, most of us did not hit 55 miles an hour on the way to church tonight, but I would imagine the Millers did. I would hope that the others of us did not hit 55s on the way from home to church here tonight. But do you know there was obviously a day when the thought of driving in a vehicle at 55 miles an hour was frightening. The very thought of going that fast, in fact, the very thought of going even 25 miles an hour was frightful. And certainly I can't imagine what it was like for the first person who got in the vehicle that suddenly wasn't going just 20 miles an hour, just a touch faster than a horse. But now going 55, 60 miles an hour. I imagine the first person who did that had a lot of faith in what he was riding in. You know, today, again, we can't wait to get out of the little town so we can get back up to 55. Traffic slows down. We went to Chicago last Friday. By the time we hit the wonderful city of Bolingbrook, so about the time we hit the wonderful shores of Lake Michigan, I don't know that we ever made it above about 25 miles an hour. Fortunately, it's not that far of a drive from Bolingbrook into the city, but 20, 15, 10, 6 miles an hour seems unbearably slow. Riding home, it was an amazing adventure to be able to hit Lakeshore Drive and hit right to 55 and immediately, literally going 55 on 55. And what a joy. In fact, I even made a comment, oh, this is so much better than it was going into the city. You know, we've lived that. We've experienced that. We've driven that fast before. Probably driven faster than that before. And it's the fear there is not there anymore. Who's done it before? The first time on the airplane, probably the same similar circumstance. Once you've done it, you can do it again. First time on a roller coaster, first time on a water slide. Some people, although this did not happen to me, but the first time shooting a gun, a little fearful. There's a lot of things that we do the first time that are frightful, but if we can put it in this context, the more times we do that which is frightful, the easier it is to be comfortable with it, if that makes sense. Well, the same thing applies with our God, I believe, in a kind of a very different realm, but in that way, as our relationship with our God grows in trusting His wisdom, when we can see again and again and again that our God is wise. Yes, there are still going to be times where we feel like we're getting the roller coaster the first time. There's still going to be times in our life where we feel like, I don't believe I've ever driven this fast before. There's still going to be times where this that we're facing is awfully fearful. But have we learned to grow with our God so we can trust Him? We trust in Him. Trust in His wisdom. Trust that what He knows, what He is doing, what He's accomplishing is right. Job, a couple of verses here. Job, wanted to go over. Job chapter 42, verse 5 says, Job, I've referred to this verse before. Job says this, obviously, at the end of the book. After all of the trials and sufferings that he's gone through, he says this, I have heard of thee by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye seeth thee. Keep in mind that a man who is accounted faithful by God Himself at chapter 1 says this, I heard of thee by the hearing of my ear. Faithful Job, chapter 1, goes through trial after trial after trial after trial, and he looks back, we could say, he looks back to chapter 1 of his life, and he says, back in chapter 1, I heard of you. I knew you with my ears. But after this and this and this and this and this and this is my life, now it's not just a hearing you with my ears, but seeing you with my eyes. Job had to go through this process of learning how to trust God. And the glue that allowed him to do that? Trials. And it wasn't just one. It was one after the next, after the next, after the next. I've heard of thee by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye seeth thee. The very next verse, I should have had you turn to this chapter here in Job. The very next verse, Job chapter 42, verse 6 says this. Wherefore, if you don't have your Bibles already open to Job 42, let me ask you this question. What would follow in our understanding? I used to think I knew all about you, but I now realize, having gone through all these trials, I realize that what my knowledge of you was before was elementary to compare my knowledge, my relationship with you now. Therefore, what would we say? We could be even like Paul and say, I glory in infirmity. Maybe if we were so spiritual-minded. But notice what he says. Wherefore I abhor myself and repent in dust and ashes. Now our faith and trials and me are kind of like a pendulum. And the closer the pendulum swings to me, the farther it is from our God. But the farther the pendulum swings away from me, the closer it is to my God. And Job was beginning to learn that. He was learning that trusting in God's wisdom meant that it was less of me and more of you. And I need to get that pendulum to swing away. I need to abhor myself. I am repenting of who I am. In dust and ashes, the ultimate symbol of great sorrow, great repentance. I need to get that pendulum away from me and swing it away, because the farther it is from me, the closer it is to you. But conversely speaking, the closer it is to me, the more that this is about me, the more that I'm making decisions based on me, the farther it is from you. And ultimately, that's what he's saying here. Let me read these two verses again. I have heard of thee by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye seeth thee. My relationship with you has grown dramatically because of trials, because of adversity, because of problems. Because of that reality, because of that truth, I am learning to understand who I am in light of who you are. And even to the point of saying, I abhor myself. I despise, I reject myself, and I might learn more of you. And what an amazing aspect of truly trusting in our God. May we be able to see through our trials. I say that somewhat humorously, because that's not an easy thing to learn. Maybe learn through our trials that very reality of that pendulum swinging. The closer it is to me, the farther it is from God. The farther away from me it is, the closer it is to God. And may we have that same attitude in our trials of truly trusting Him in His wisdom. Look at the last phrase in this quote. Through adversity, we learn to bow before His sovereignty. Again, I need trials to learn to truly bow before His sovereignty. To trust in His wisdom. Again, I need to be able to face the trials even of Job, to be able to understand the concept and see my relationship with my God increasing, growing in that regard. But then to experience His consolation of His love. I'm going to call it, just kind of keep the participles going the same way in prepositions, living by His love. Bowing before His sovereignty, trusting in His wisdom, living by His love. Several months ago now, we talked about the topic of God's love, and how that is a topic that's easily talked about, but I fear seldom truly lived, truly grasped in our lives the love of our God. Again, the connection between those three. Sometimes we can admit that God is powerful, but question whether or not He knows what He's doing. Sometimes it's easy to admit that God is powerful, but we wonder if He is doing what is best for me, His love for me. Or we might admit that He is loving to me, but maybe He's not as in control as we once thought He was. But to understand that all three of these things go together, His sovereignty, His wisdom, and His love, are the three connecting, interconnected aspects of our God that grows in the midst of the trials in our life. Well, let me say it this way, it should grow in the midst of our trials in our life. Again, referring back to the, his name again, Daniel Baker. And he faced something along those lines, which I know many have faced. And not necessarily just in the military, but he faced that loss. Braden Ely out here on the 17. Lost his life a couple years ago. The question would be, Lord, do you love me? Why are you allowing me to go through this? But we need to have that hard attitude that because I'm going through this trial, I'm able to understand in a greater way your love. And the question we ask, as we could with all of these, can we truly know God's love for us outside of trials? Again, we can talk about his love for us, but do we truly grasp and understand and fully grasp his love for us? If somehow we can live a life absent of problems, somehow live a life absent of adversity, absent of trials, would I fully be able to grasp his love? You know, the old traditional wedding vows, for better or for worse. You know, it would be easy. In fact, we've seen this evidence, especially in higher society cultures, certainly not Stark County by any means necessarily, but we've seen that when there's the better taking place, love is everywhere, and people are falling in love, and all is well. But ultimately, the true reality of that love takes place the moment that the better begins to turn into the worst, and so they realize, wait a minute, this is what I bargained for. You know, it's ultimately in marriage, better for worse, I think is understood better in the worse than it is in the better. If you can pick that up. You ever had a good friend and who stood by you through what do you say, thick and thin? Sometimes it's during those hard times that we understand in a better way their faithfulness, their love for us. Not because everything's going well, but it's when things are not going well that we fully grasp the reality of that connection, that bond, that fellowship. Look at the last week and apparently this week as well. With that relationship that we have. I often marvel, I hope I'm not speaking out of line here, but I often marvel when I hear Mrs. Dustin speak about marriage. Because from what I have heard, not from Mrs. Dustin, but from what I've heard from others in town, that at time Bob Dustin was maybe not the easiest man to be married to. And some people that knew him here in Toulon. And she's kind of hinted at times in that regard, but I've never heard her complaining about her husband. But I have to say, from what I've heard, from what others have told me, because obviously I didn't know him at all, that certainly there would have been plenty of reasons for her to say, you know what, this is not what I bargained for. And again, that's not how I'm not speaking her words. I'm just speaking what others have told me that should have been her words. And I don't know if this was a before salvation compared to after salvation, or I don't know. I don't know him, so I can't speak. I know that he did a lot for the church. He literally built this building. So I know that he was crucial in the beginning of his church. But it amazes me when I know, at least at this point, Mrs. Dustin, and again, I don't think I'm speaking out of line to say this, she is a very strong, independent lady. And so you have a very strong, independent lady married to potentially, from the stories I've heard, to some guy that was maybe at times difficult to get along with. When I hear her talking about marriage today, I want to kind of listen more intently, because here's a lady that understood that for better or for worse. And again, I've never heard her complain about her husband. I've never heard her say, well, I couldn't wait to the day I was alone. I've never heard that. And yet I've heard many times her making a strong statement in regards to marriage. And I marvel at that. And it brings me back to this, living by his love. And there are times that it's our love for our God is strengthened, and more specifically, our understanding of God's love for me is strengthened when I go through trials, when I go through those difficult times, when I go through those situations that, well, this is tough. But I'm able to grasp God's love in an even greater way. Romans 8:35 says this: who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall tribulation or distress, or persecution, or famine, or nakedness, or peril, or sword? 2 verses later, verse 37, it says this: nay, in all these things we are more than conquerors through him that, it's the last words, that loved us. What shall separate us from the love of God? The answer to the question, the kind of a rhetorical question he gives, is in essence nothing will. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter what the tribulation is. It doesn't matter what the distress is. Persecution, famine, nakedness, peril, sword. Even death itself will not separate us from the love of God. But because of the love of God, in all of those things of tribulation, distress, persecution, famine, nakedness, peril, sword, in all of those things, we are more than. What a great picture. We're not just conquerors. We are more than conquerors because of his love for us. Do we grasp life? Do we grasp our trials? Do we grasp our adversity in the light of Romans chapter 8? That regardless of what I'm facing, it's not going to separate me from my God and his love for me. In fact, it's because of his love that I am able to grasp the very reality that I'm not just a conqueror of this, but I'm more than a conqueror of this because he loves me. And we use those situations of tribulation, of distress, of persecution, of famine, of nakedness, of peril, of sword, to remind us of the might of God's love that goes beyond our greatest need, goes beyond our greatest trial, goes beyond our greatest affliction, even to the extent of more than conquerors. More than conquerors. Philippians chapter 3, verse 10. Probably another familiar verse is this, that I may know him. This is Paul speaking. What a great verse this is. That I may know him. The whole point, although I have it wrong on the screen, but it's relationship. Our relationship with our God is the last, at least in our chapters, the last kind of objective benefit of our trials of our life. And Paul says this, that I might know him. Imagine Paul saying those 5 simple words. I might know him. A guy who had sacrificed so much throughout his life, who spent seemingly in ministry aspect of it, maybe more time in prison than he did actually on the road, on the streets. A guy who had to escape for his life in many cities. A guy who certainly could have feared for his life in probably all cities, all because of the gospel of Christ. And that man says this, that I might know him, that I might increase in my knowledge of him, and he continues on, and the power of his resurrection and the fellowship of his sufferings, that I might know him, ... even his suffering, being made conformable unto his death. Notice that to desire to truly know him is not the end, but to be able to understand that knowing Christ sometimes means that I'm going to suffer as he suffered. That my relationship with my God, that my knowledge of him is not going to be a trial-free life, but many times those trials are going to be for my benefit, that I might learn even more of him. A guy who suffered greatly. I don't know if I could confidently say more so than Job, but I would dare say more so than most would say, I long to know him. And I'm eagerly anticipating those trials, that I might know him more. May that be our challenge as well. Again, the reality of his sovereignty, his wisdom, and his love in regards to our relationship with our God. And the thing that holds that all together at times is our adversity, our trials, the circumstances of our life. And honestly, there are times that we face trials, and I face trials, that perhaps the last thing on our mind is his sovereignty, his wisdom, and his goodness, his love for me. But the reality is that there are times that our God allows those trials, brings those trials. He is sovereign, so all trials are under his control. They are for my betterment, they are for my good, that I might be able to know him more. And to be able to have that this is an objective, this is a reality, this is the benefit of trial, is to know my God more. To be able to bow before his sovereignty, to trust in his wisdom, and live truly by his love. Boy, we love it all if everything was just for the better. But how often we learn more of ourselves, we learn more of others, we learn more of our God in the for the worse. And we're able to say then, like many have said before us, as Paul coined perfectly, therefore I glory in infirmity. The grace of God may rest upon me. What a joy, what a power, what a statement, what an understanding. Relationship as the last objective, adversity. No Wednesday service next week, but Lord willing, the first Wednesday of January, we'll continue on with chapter 13. Let's go to the Lord of prayer. Lord, we thank you again for your word. I thank you for just what we were able to learn even in the midst of trials, in the midst of adversity, in the midst of things not going well for us. I ask that you would challenge us, remind us that those very things that in our estimation are not going well are actually intended maybe to purge us, maybe to create you more, your likeness more in us, perhaps it's more of that holiness and dependence upon you, the fellowship, and all of the other traits that we've gone over. But I pray that we'd be reminded of the very reality of growing in a relationship with you as a result of our trials. Not that we're drawn farther from you, but drawn closer to you. And I just pray that we have that kind of heart, that kind of mindset, and that we'd even be able to rejoice in infirmities, just knowing that because of this trial, because of this need, we have an opportunity, a great opportunity, to understand you more, to love you more, to grow closer to you more in our walk. And we thank you for those opportunities. I pray that as we go our separate ways, certainly not one of us even knows what yet even tonight brings, but I pray that you would use us and strengthen us, that we'd be able to grow in you and learn to love you more. In Jesus' name, amen.